Welcome to the 2015 Q2 DevTools webinar. We're excited that you decided to take time out of your busy schedule to spend the next hour with us showing you all the amazing things we've been working on for the past couple of months. We really appreciate your time. So as a quick introduction, my name is Michael Crump and I work at Telerik as a developer advocate. You can find me on Twitter at mbcrump and feel free to reach out to me at any time. Before we get started, if you're having any audio or video issues, please use the panel below to let us know. We have a team that is waiting that will respond to you very quickly. Also, the recording for this webinar will be available on YouTube later today in high definition. So if you have to leave or something happens with your internet connection, don't worry, we have you covered. So we're known for giving away great prizes during our DevTools webinar, and this time is no different. We're going to give away an Apple Watch for whoever asked the best question, along with an unlocked Samsung Galaxy S6 for whoever provides the best feature suggestion. Simply drop your question or feature suggestion into the panel to be eligible to win. We'd also love for you to follow us on Twitter to see what we're up to, as well as we'll be posting a link to the video and prize winners there. You can follow us on Twitter at Telerik. We're always looking for ways to improve on our products and wanted to mention that we have a portal set up at feedback.telerik.com. You can do things here such as submitting general feedback or ideas, requesting new features and products, even voting up items that are important to you and your team, and much more. We would love for you to check it out today. Today we're going to be talking about all the new things added in the Q2 release, from new responsive features in our ASP.NET offerings, to business and enterprise functionality added to our Wpf and Winforms suites, to the brand new Telerik Report Server, which enables business users to manage reports easily from any device. We're also going to discuss our mobile offering, which includes a highly requested control for Xamarin.Forms, as well as other features that you have requested. So who is going to share all of this awesome content with us? So we have Sam Basu with us. He is a developer advocate and he can be found on Twitter at SamIDIP. He is going to give us the rundown on Telerik Report Server, what's new in Winforms, Kendo UI, and ASP.NET MVC. I hope Sam can talk faster than I can because that is a ton of stuff. You'll also be hearing from me again with what is new in WPF, and I'll also be talking about Xamarin.Forms. So to kick things off, we'll start with Ed Charbonneau, our resident web expert, who's going to take us through all the goodies added in ASP.NET. Ed, the virtual stage is yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Michael, and welcome everyone. Today we'll be exploring what's new in Telerik Ui for ASP.NET Ajax. Let's get started with a quick overview, and then we'll get into some demos. The UI for ASP.NET Ajax has more than 80 controls developed over the course of 11 years, and we continue to add and release new features 3 times each year. All of the controls you see here tagged in blue have received updates in this release. Now, 11 years is a long time, and we may not have hoverboards yet, but mobile computing has certainly changed. This is what mobile computing looked like in 2004 when we released the very first Telerik control, the Rad Editor. In 2004, the Rad Editor was not only the first Telerik control, but also the first what you see is what you get web editor on the market. And that's why today we're especially proud to announce the Rad Editor is the first what you see is what you get web editor on the market that offers an adaptive UI for smartphones. The new adaptive Rad Editor provides a mobile optimized user experience for small devices, and no detail was left behind. The new render mode offers an easy-to-touch, bottom-placed toolbar, touch-friendly drop-downs, and a dialog that always pops up to fit the visible viewport of your smartphone. Users familiar with Google Docs or Microsoft Word Mobile will feel right at home using Rad Editor on their mobile device. Best of all, this isn't a separate control. It's the same editor that you know and love, with the ability to identify and adapt to mobile. Now let's take a look at the Rad Editor in action. For this demo, I'll be sharing a screen from my Android device. This is real hardware, not an emulator, and not a browser simulation. To place the editor in edit mode, simply click the pencil icon in the upper left-hand corner. This will launch the full screen editing experience. The toolbar across the top of the editor has Undo, Redo, Edit Selection, Find Replace, Code View, and Save Actions. I'm going to select the text Smartphones and click the Edit Selection action. Notice the contextual toolbar conveniently placed at the bottom of the screen within thumb's reach. This toolbar contains all the actions I need to edit text, including font size, color, alignment, and more. Let's make some changes to the selected text. We'll start by increasing the font size. 22 pixels I think looks about right. And with a quick tap, we can go ahead and make this bold. Let's give this some foreground color too. We'll tap foreground and bring up the color picker. Let's go ahead and set this to white. We'll do the same thing for background. How about a nice blue? And then I think this looks about right. I'll go ahead and save this by clicking the check mark in the upper right-hand corner. When the Rad Editor is in adaptive mode, it still retains the same functionality as it does on the desktop. Even functions like Undo and Redo are maintained on mobile. Let's go back and remove those changes we just made. Again, we'll tap the Edit icon and then bring up the toolbar at the top and simply tap the Undo icon several times until we clear out the changes. With a few simple taps, we're back to where we started. The editing capabilities in adaptive mode are even robust enough to create and edit hyperlinks, HTML tables, and embed and manage images. Let's change a hyperlink in the document to see just how powerful the contextual interface is. When a link is selected in the document, the interface automatically chooses the proper editor of the content. With the link selected, we can apply a CSS class, edit the link properties, or completely remove the link. Let's tap Remove Link so we can see how a new link is created. Tapping the ellipsis with the text selected brings up the Insert menu. Let's select Hyperlink Manager and create a new link. Notice the fields are already pre-filled. All I need to do is complete the URL and save. The Rad Editor is just one of many controls in this release with new adaptive rendering. The tree list features improvements to help you build apps tailored to any device. The control not only delivers bigger touch zones on mobile devices, but also new views, buttons, context menus, and support for gestures. These improvements make the control very easy to use, even on smartphone. We've also added adaptive rendering to our image gallery control. Now you can build image galleries end users will enjoy browsing, even on mobile phones. When they access the control on a mobile device, it will deliver a user interface optimized for small screens, as well as support the most popular gestures like spread, pinch, tap, and swipe. The image gallery comes with 3 modes: image, image slider, and a thumbnails area. It also includes a full screen mode. In addition, we've updated our data pager control. The component is now optimized for touch devices and is fully responsive. For your convenience, it exposes server-side attributes, enabling you to hide the page size field, trim page number fields, and change the position of the data pager button field. And adaptive rendering is not limited to this release. We've been hard at work constantly updating UI for ASP.NET Ajax. You can find more adaptive controls, plus many responsive web controls throughout the entire toolbox. So by now you're probably wondering why I'm not showing code for these examples. Well, there really isn't that much code involved. The UI for ASP.NET Ajax handles all of the device detection and rendering for you. All you have to do is enable adaptive rendering for the control, or for the entire project. Our controls will handle the rest. You can do this in your web config file by setting render mode to auto, and you're all set to go mobile. Setting the render mode to auto in your web config will also enable our next new feature, lightweight rendering. Lightweight rendering enables reduced markup, easier customization, and modern semantic rendering and more. Lightweight rendering is now available for tab strip, scheduler, toolbar, ribbon bar, notification, progress bar, and input manager. In Q3, we aim to enable lightweight rendering for all of our controls. In addition, we'll be releasing lightweight optimized DLLs that are smaller and more efficient. Keep an eye on our blogs for upcoming roadmaps and details. In the last release, we introduced the Client Export Manager. This control adds what you see is what you get export capabilities to your application. Client Export Manager supports multiple formats including image, SVG, and PDF. When customers saw how powerful the Client Export Manager was, you asked for more, and we listened. That's why Client Export Manager now supports multi-page PDF export. Let's jump into Visual Studio and see how it works. Okay, I have Visual Studio open, and I'm going to run the page so we can see what the demo looks like. Here we have our demo page. It lists several recipes and allows the user to export all of the recipes to PDF at the click of a button. Let's give it a try. Notice that only the visible recipe was exported. This is because the normal functionality of the Client Export Manager is a what you see is what you get representation. Let's dive into the code and see how the page is wired up. Then we'll modify the Export Manager so it gives the user a multi-page export that includes all the recipes. In the top of the markup, you can see we have our Client Export Manager. The Client Export Manager is triggered when the client clicks the Export button. Let's look at the client-side code and see how it's invoked. The Export All Recipes function is pretty straightforward. First, we find the Client Export Manager control. Then we use a CSS selector to identify the root-level HTML element we wish to export. That would be inner multi-page. If we scroll up, we can see that inner multi-page is a Rad multi-page view. This is where the markup for all of our recipes is defined. Let's modify the code so this Client Export Manager exports all of the recipes in the Rad multi-page. We'll start by adding a property to the Client Export Manager, Page Break Selector. Here we'll set the CSS selector that will identify a page break. Let's call it Page Break. Next, we add a Page Break class to each element that contains a new page. We can save and refresh the example now, and clicking the Export button will now give us a nicely formatted multi-page PDF document. Next, we'll take a look at the new customization update for the HTML chart control. If you need to customize the appearance of the chart, you'll find the improvements in this release super useful. You can now control the width, height, orientation of the legend, and also fine-tune the position through the align, offset, X and Y properties of the appearance tag. In addition, you now have the ability to implement custom visualization items, axis titles, labels, markers, and series by utilizing the Kendo UI drawing API. Let's look at the demo to see this new feature in action. Here we have a visual template demo. You'll notice that the series elements, markers, and legend have all been given custom geometry. Let's look at the code for this demo and see how it works. We'll jump back into Visual Studio and look at the code behind the HTML chart. Each item's visual property gives us an extensibility point. Here we can define a JavaScript function that returns custom geometry. Let's look a little deeper. Here we have a JavaScript function named Telerik Demo Column Visual. If we open the corresponding JavaScript file, we should be able to find this function. Notice that column visual makes a call to create column. If we scroll up to create column, we'll find that this function is responsible for drawing the custom cylinders that we saw on the chart. All of the API calls being made in this function are part of the Kendo UI drawing library. You can find out more about the Kendo drawing library by visiting the Telerik Ui for ASP.NET Ajax documentation. The next update is in the works, but it isn't ready today. Soon you can expect the release of our new Theme Builder tool. The new Theme Builder will give you the ability to create and edit skins for modern, lightweight, and mobile rendering. Do you have a custom Bootstrap theme that you'd like to use with the UI for ASP.NET Ajax? Well, soon the new Theme Builder will be able to analyze your theme and generate a custom, colorized Telerik skin based on the one you provided. Remember to stop by blogs.telerik.com for more updates and information. Let's review what we've covered today. There were multiple controls updated with mobile adaptive rendering, including the revolutionary Rad Editor that brings Microsoft Word-like functionality to your next application. There are 7 controls that can now take advantage of the new lightweight rendering mode, and we anticipate all of the controls to be ready with lightweight rendering for the Q2 release this fall. Lightweight rendering not only reduces control complexity, but makes customization much easier too. We looked at the new multi-page PDF export for the Client Export Manager. This feature was highly anticipated since the controls released just a short time ago. The HTML chart control received updates that allow for complete control of the visual output of the control. By leveraging the Kendo Drawing API, chart customization is limitless. Now you can satisfy even the toughest customer requests. And finally, we saw a preview of the upcoming Theme Builder. Watch for Theme Builder news and updates in the coming month. To get the most out of your Telerik subscription, make sure you check out the following resources. Our demos have been updated with the latest release. This means you can stop by demos.telerik.com and explore all of the demos you saw earlier. Also keep updated on the latest Telerik news by visiting our blogs. You'll find roadmaps, white papers, announcements, and more. And don't forget to visit our community resources at developer.telerik.com. Thanks. Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Ed. Now we'll take a look at desktop and mobile. The first thing that I'm pleased to announce is that our native controls for iOS and Android are now part of DevCraft Ultimate. So if you already have a subscription, you can take advantage of this right now and have access to our native controls such as Chart, Calendar, List View, and many more. We've recently added the data form control, which allows you to build various forms such as registration, data entry, and login. Taking a look now at our Xamarin offering, we've added List View for Xamarin.Forms. We've also included 2 new controls for Xamarin wrappers, the data form as described earlier, and an alert control. You can learn more about all of these controls at telerik.com/Xamarin-UI, but today we'll focus on List View for Xamarin.Forms. As mentioned earlier, the List View control is now available for Xamarin.Forms. It includes all the essential features that you have asked for. Some of the features included in this release are the List View supports grid or linear layouts. It also ships with pull to refresh functionality. The new items load on top of the feed by pulling down from the top of the list. List View also supports both single and multiple selection, so items can be selected on tap or on hold gestures, and many more features. Enough talk, let's go ahead and see this in action. Before jumping in, there is one thing that I wanted to point out, was that if you log into your account and you go to your products and then product versions, and in this instance we're going to be taking a look at Xamarin. If you go to that page and you scroll down, you'll see that we now have Nuget packages. Nuget packages are absolutely terrific in order to get all the required dependencies installed in your Xamarin.Forms app. I've went ahead and I've set up a local repository. So here you can see that I'm running Nuget server. Here is where it's actually located at. So now if I switch back over to Visual Studio, we'll see that we have a Xamarin.Forms project. And under references, for example, I could just go to references, I could right click, I could select manage Nougat packages, and I could give this a second to start, but you'll notice that I went ahead and added a company Nuget feed. And so here I could simply select this and install it, which I've already installed it, and all of the required dependencies would be added for me. That also works obviously with your Android project as well as your iOS and finally with your Windows Phone. So let's go ahead and take a look now at what is included in Listview for Xamarin.Forms. So I'm going to be working with Android primarily today. So the first thing that you'll see is that I have went ahead and went into my app.cs and I've added 3 demos. One is going to be simply populating data, which I've just called main page equals new main page. Then I've got another demo where I'm going to show you pull to refresh functionality. And then the third demo is going to be swiping items that will allow you to increase or decrease values of items in a cell. So there is the 3 demos that we're going to take a look at. Inside my Telerik Listview xf.droid, for references, I just went ahead and simply used the Nuget package as before to add the required references. And in my main activity, the only thing that I added here was this one line, which is just the assembly information. And this can obviously be found inside of the documentation. There's nothing else that I actually added on this page because it was already pointing to new app. So I'm going to close out of that and I'll just collapse that branch and we'll look entirely in our portable class library. So taking a look at the main page.xaml, I went ahead and added in the XML namespaces to Telerik Data Controls and then another one for Telerik Listview. Now we don't necessarily need both of them for this demo, but I found that once you start working with more complex scenarios, you're going to need both of these, which I'll show you that in the third example. Once I did that, I went ahead and I set up just a simple grid, a row definition, and then I have a label that's kind of our first getting started text, and then I'm just calling Telerik Data Controls, Rad Listview, giving it a name, and then which grid.row I want that placed inside of. And the code behind a file here, the only thing that I have added is just a listview.itemSource equals new list, and then I'm just adding in all of the different types of developer advocates. So this is a very simple getting started, just here's how to get some content in your application. Let's see what this actually looks like on the phone. So I'm going to go ahead and run this on my Nexus 5 device. So here it is, it has been loaded. You can see the getting started demo is that was located in our label, and then we actually have the different types of developer advocates. Now I can select one, but it's not going to do anything. You may see on your screen a black highlight below it. We're going to do something with that later on. But then if I go ahead and I change, and again you can't scroll at this point, but if I go ahead and I change orientation, that you'll see I can now go ahead and start scrolling. So for our first getting started, you can see it was really just one line of code. Let's go ahead and switch back and take a look at our second example. So our second example is going to be taking a look at the pull to refresh functionality. So I'm going to select that XAML file. Again, I'm just setting up just a grid here. I've got a label as well that just says pull to refresh demo, and I'm setting a couple of properties here, and then I'm adding Telerik Data Controls, Rad Listview. I'm giving it a name, but the one thing that's different here is that I'm adding is pull to refresh enabled, and I'm setting that to true. If I look at the code behind a file here, you'll see that the only thing that I'm really doing is I've went ahead and added a variable here with count equals to 10, and then once this loads, it's going to go ahead and set the item source to a range from 0 to 10, and I've added in a method here called refresh requested. You can see once you add that in, you're going to want to make that async, and then I've just added a delay of maybe 3 seconds. Again, we're updating the item source, the count, and then after it's completed, we want to call listview.enRefresh. And once you're starting to work with this, you'll notice that the pull to refresh requested event args is this namespace that you will have to add. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at what the pull to refresh functionality looks like. I'm going to go ahead and make a change quickly in my app.cs, and now we'll load it again. Okay, here we are again. We can see the pull to refresh demo label is up at the top, and then again we just went ahead and we've populated 10 items in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hold down, and you can see from here we start to see an indicator that the pull to refresh has started. Now it's automatically updating the animation, and I have went ahead and I have added in some more items. So now I've got items 10 through 19, just like the code was showing below. So I'll do it one last time where you can get another look at the animation, and the animation is specific for Android, and it also looks different on iOS. Okay, so we've looked at 2 quick demos. Let's look at another one that requires swiping an item. Back to the project, I've went ahead and I've set our main page to swipe an item, and I'm going to go to the source code for that page. And so for swipe an item, again, we're setting up a couple of grid.row definitions, and then we have a label that just says swipe an item. And if I give us some more room, you can see that we have Telerik data controls, Rad list view, and then we're giving it a name as well as a row, and then is item swipe enabled is the key here. You have to turn that on to true, and then you can turn on the swipe threshold, which I've just set to 10. But inside of each one of these, you need to actually define a template. So here I've got an item template, and I start with a data template, and we're going to drill down to where we get to start seeing a stacked layout that's going to be binding to some text. It's just called name. And then we have another stacked layout that's horizontal, and this is 2 labels, one that says gray with an amount and another one that's text, and that's going to be binding on something called value. If we scroll down, we can see what actually happens on the item swipe content template. So once they swipe an item, again, we're going to set up a couple of grid.column definitions, but we're going to add 2 buttons. So they're going to be able to either increase or decrease the value of the item that's currently selected. And you can see I'm going ahead and I'm setting some background colors, but I'm also adding a clicked event handler. If I look at the clicked event handler, you can see that I'm using just a random, because I just want some random data added here. Again, I'm setting my item source to this.getSource, which is 10, which is located here, and then I've set my listview.swipe offset, and this is just for some device specific stuff where it looks great on iOS and Android. So whenever we call the getSource method, it's going to go ahead and it's going to add 10 items at the beginning that has the product and it has a value. Whenever I increase the button or I decrease the button, then we're going to see what happens is it's actually going to either increase the product that we've added or decrease the product. And all of these is coming from a simple class that I have here just called item, which implements the iNotify property changed. So you can see we have value added, and then we have name, and then we have age, and then the rest of this is just boilerplate code. Let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. Okay, so here we are again. It has loaded. I'm going to go ahead and select one of these products and I'm going to swipe. So now that I did a swipe, it is asking me to increase or decrease. So this example, I'm on product 4 with the amount 5. If I hit the increase button, so we've just increased product 4's amount by 6. I could come back into the same item. I could hit the decrease button and you'll see it's back at 5 along with the animations. So this is just one example of swiping an item. There's obviously much more that you can do with Listview. I'd encourage you to check out the docs for more info. Taking a look now at UI for WPF, Rad Wizard is now official and enables the seamless generation of multi-step wizard dialogues. Desktop Alert will display a small notification on the screen to alert the user that an event has occurred. We've also added document processing library improvements to rich text box and chart view. In Q1 2015, we released 3 new Visual Studio templates that were inspired by Outlook, Word, and Excel. In Q2, we've expanded our Visual Studio templates to include 2 additional templates inspired by Outlook, Mail, and Calendar view. Here is the app that is generated if you select the Mail template, and here is the app if you select the Calendar template. For both of these templates, keep in mind that you didn't have to write any code in order to generate the app. We've created a new integration demo inspired by Outlook that can be found at the URL below. The sample application will join the email and the calendar view combined with the basic backstage functionality. You can find the source code to this app by logging into your account and looking under Demos and Sample Applications. Let's take a look now at Desktop Alert for UI for WPF. So I'm already inside of Visual Studio and I went ahead and just added a button, and that button just says Trigger Alert. I have a click event handler called Button Click Me, and if I go to my main window.xaml.cs, you'll see that I only need a few lines of code to actually get something working here. So I'm instantiating a new instance of Rad Desktop Alert. I'm giving it a header as well as filling in some content and then a duration of about 5 seconds. I'm going to need to use Rad Desktop Alert Manager in order to show the alert. So I'm just going to instantiate that and just simply call manager.showAlert and pass in the alert that we declared earlier. I'm going to run this application, and once I run it, I'm going to trigger the alert. Down at the bottom, you can see here is the actual alert. It says new email, hello, here are the resources to the Q2 DevTools webinar. Okay, I think we can do better than this. We can obviously go ahead and close this and stop our application, but we may want to go ahead and add in some sort of theme. Now there's plenty of themes that's currently available. The one that I'm going to use is Visual Studio 2013, and you'll see this theme whenever you create a brand new project. So I'm going to go into my app.xaml, and you'll notice that it went ahead and it added in these resource dictionaries to the 3 controls that's needed in order to make this work. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to uncomment those. I'm going to go back to my application and I'm going to run it again, and I'll click Trigger Alert, and you can see now it's kind of got this nice blue background and white text. Let's go ahead and add an icon to finish up this demo. So I'm going to stop the application. I'm going to go back to our main window.xaml.cs, and from here I'm going to use one of the built-in image icons. It's just going to be called Desktop Alert Icon. Again, this is all in the documentation. I'm going to set a width and a height, as well as the column width and the icon margin. I'll start the project again, and I'll trigger the alert. And now you can see we're starting to have a desktop alert that mimics what you would see in maybe Microsoft Outlook. So we've got a nice icon, we've got our header, and we've got our content, and here obviously you can close it out. So that's the taste of Desktop Alert for UI for WPF. Let's wrap up with a couple of resources. You can go to telerik.com/devcraft to learn about all of the products included in the suite, as well as download some trials. Our documentation can be found at docs.telerik.com. And if you want to take a deeper look at the demos that I showed you today, you can at bit.ly/Telerik Q2 2015. Now over to you, Sam.
All right, thank you, Michael. Looks like my slides are up. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you again for joining us. We're about 2/3 of the way down. Hopefully you grabbed a big cup of coffee as you sat down. This is the last stretch, and I won't keep you for too long, maybe 15 to 20 minutes max. But I have some really exciting things to show you. I will fly through a lot of details in my slides and demos, but don't worry, we'll make everything available to you by the end of today or tomorrow. Okay, so once again, I am Sam Basu, one of your Telerik developer advocates. This is totally not how I look right now. I have a pretty full beard, but I'm just going to honor the headshot that these guys grabbed for me. That Twitter handle at SAMIDIP, that's the quickest way to get hold of me, so we can keep the conversation going after this webinar. All right, let's jump in. We begin with Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC. Now, Ed talked a lot about UI for ASP.NET Ajax, which is meant for Webforms developers. Now let's take a look at what's in this release for MVC developers. Now, as most of you guys already know, our UI for ASP.NET MVC suite is meant for the MVC developer to stay inside of Visual Studio and build rich and responsive web apps. You get 70 plus UI components and framework pieces, but something to keep in mind is all of that UI is actually powered by Kendo UI. This is our client-side JavaScript framework, but you don't have to write all of that HTML JavaScript on the client side. You get to write MVC controls, which get rendered as Kendo UI widgets. Now, the nice thing about this is anytime the Kendo UI framework gets updates for its controls and framework pieces, those updates trickle down automatically to your MVC control suite. So, let's talk about what's new in Kendo UI. As Ed mentioned, responsiveness is pretty hot. The web is ubiquitous and it should just work on any device. So a lot of the hard-hitting Kendo UI widgets, like all of the charting controls, the tab strip, the editor, they all get responsive features in this release. All of the online demos for you to play with the Kendo UI widgets actually get responsive features as well, which is very cool, and I'll show you that in just one second. Now, if you work in a big enterprise or government sectors, accessibility for your web applications is pretty important to you, and we are very proud to announce that with this release, we have full Section 508 compliancy for every one of the Kendo UI widgets. If you are making mobile web or hybrid applications with Kendo UI, we have a brand new charming mobile theme for you, and we call it the Nova. I'll show you that in just one second as well. And there are many more updates in the Kendo UI framework. There is actually a whole dedicated webinar just to cover all that's new in Kendo UI, and that's coming up on July 22nd. So feel free to register and stay tuned. Okay, now let's go back to talking about UI for ASP.NET MVC. The reason we digressed and talked about Kendo UI is because all of those Kendo UI framework updates are available to you free and automatically inside of the MVC control suite. Now, as we all know, UI for ASP.NET MVC is actually much more than just wrappers for Kendo UI widgets. It is squarely meant for the Visual Studio MVC developer, and quite naturally we take advantage of all the richness of the ecosystem that comes with ASP.NET and Visual Studio as an IDE. Now, the world of ASP.NET is going through a transformative change. ASP.NET 5 is around the corner, and it's a modern, lean, modular, and a cross-platform web application framework. Along with it comes MVC 6, which is the next iteration of ASP.NET MVC, and all of this is inside Visual Studio 2015. Now, all of this goodness is still in beta. It's coming, but we are looking at these things actively and working with Microsoft. We are happy to announce full support for MVC 6 and Visual Studio 2015 for the Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC suite. As MVC 6 and Visual Studio 2015 RTM, we will be right there and ready for your MVC controls to work with the new frameworks. Something which is very unique to the Telerik UI for MVC suite is Visual Studio MVC Scaffolding. And I'll talk about this in much more detail because it does save you a lot of work as a developer. Now also, with ASP.NET 5 around the corner, things get very modular. You might be on Windows or OS X or Linux and you just want to pull down the components that you need for your web application. So Nuget plays a huge role. And we're happy to announce there is a trial public Nuget feed for you to get the UI for ASP.NET MVC suite from Telerik. Now, this trial public Nuget feed is for you to experiment with our support for MVC 6. Eventually, as ASP.NET 5 and MVC 6 are released, this will be one more official way to get the Telerik MVC suite that you love. But this Nuget feed will obviously go behind an authentication that's tied to your Telerik account. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper. One of the things we aim for is to remain cognitive of your challenges as a developer. And we know that lots of you deal with complicated custom objects or data collections that you want to render as a Telerik grid or a chart or a scheduler. This is where our Mvc Style Scaffolding is really going to help you. With just a few clicks, you have complete chaining between your model, your view, and your controller. All of your CRUD operations, your create, read, update, and delete operations, and all of the plumbing code that goes into it are automatically taken care of. And you also get to configure the UI of your rendered Mvc control with just a few clicks in the wizard. Now, all of this Mvc scaffolding is achieved through something we call the Kendo UI Scaffolder. It is automatically included in your Telerik MVC installation, but you can also get this separately as an extension. Alright, so we are about 5 minutes in and I'm still in slides, which is shameful. So let's jump into some demos and see some of this in action. Alright, so before we get into Visual Studio, let me show you a couple of things in my browser. I'm here at the home page for Telerik Ui for ASP.NET MVC. Now, if I click on this big demos button here, it pulls up a web page which lists out all the 70 plus controls, the framework pieces, and so on. And you can play with any one of these things in your browser. Let's start with, let's say, the grid control. Now, once we're on a specific controls demo page, you'll notice the usual things like all of the features up here, and you can change up the theme right here, but there's something new now. And that is this new ruler bar up on the top of the page. You'll notice that at marked intervals, there are labels on this ruler. These correspond to screen resolutions on different devices like your desktop, your laptop, your tablet, and your phones. And this helps you see how this particular control is going to behave in a responsive way given different screen resolutions. So as you can expect, if I start resizing the screen now, the control is going to be sensitive to the screen real estate. So let me go ahead and start resizing my window. You notice that the grid starts shrinking, and then at marked intervals where the labels are on the ruler, you notice that it starts changing its shape all the way down to, let's say, what the resolution would be like on a phone. And if you pull up the same web page from your phone or your tablet, this is how it's going to look like. So before you take any of these responsive MVC controls and use it in your own applications, these responsive online demos will give you a fairly good idea of how these controls will look like with different screen sizes. Pretty slick, right? Alright, let me go back to full screen mode here so I can show you something else. Alright, so let's go back to our product page here, and I'm going to navigate to Kendo UI. Alright, so same deal here. We're going to scroll down here and say show me all the widgets, and then let's go to the Kendo UI demos. Once this loads up, you'll notice that you have a list of all the Kendo UI widgets and their framework pieces, and every one of the UI widgets, when you look at the individual demos, they will show you that responsive scaling ruler that I talked about. So you can see exactly how the controls look like with various screen sizes. Now, there is something else here that I want to show you, and that's this guy here, the hybrid UI. Now, if you are building a mobile web app, you're going to use some very mobile specific Kendo UI widgets called the Kendo UI Mobile. Alternatively, if you are building a hybrid mobile app, which is packaged and it's available in every app store, you're going to use technologies like Cordova or PhoneGap or Telerik App Builder, but you're going to use the same Kendo UI Mobile widgets, and that's what these demos are for. So let me go ahead and hit launch here. And while that web page is coming up, I'm going to resize my browser to something that looks like a phone, right about here. So what you see here is the brand new Kendo UI mobile theme called Nova. It is simple but gorgeous. And right away you can see that it already looks like a mobile app. I have a drawer here which helps me navigate, and all of the controls inside Kendo UI Mobile that you can use in your applications are also listed out here. And you can click on any one of them and see how it behaves. For example, an action sheet, here's how it's going to look like on most phones. So right out of the gate, you have a nice modern theme to decorate your mobile apps with, and all of the controls that you need to put in your applications. Go ahead and play with it. It's fun. Alright, so let me go back to full screen mode here and show you one last thing on my browser before I forget. And that is a Nuget package. So if you head out to nuget.org/packages/kendo-mvc, you're going to end up on this Nuget package page. Now, this is a publicly available feed, so you can get to this even from inside of Visual Studio and your Nuget package manager. What this is a Nuget package that helps you get all of the bits needed for Telerik Ui for ASP.NET MVC, a trial version that is forward-facing and supporting of MVC 6. If I scroll down here in the Nuget package page, you'll notice all the dependencies on DNX. This is the new runtime for ASP.NET 5. Keep in mind that once MVC 6 comes out of beta and is formal, we would actually put this behind a private feed and a Telerik authentication. So now is the time to go ahead and play with this and experiment with the new features of MVC 6 with Telerik Ui for ASP.NET MVC. Alright, so I'm finally inside of Visual Studio, and let me show you something that's really helpful if you're an MVC developer. I'm inside of a project, which is a boilerplate MVC application. It's got its controllers and views and models. How I arrived here is simply by going File, New Project, picking Telerik Web, and either going with a C# or a VB MVC application. So let me cancel out of this since I already have a project. But one thing is, because I started with the template, I already have references to the Telerik Ui for MVC bits. If you do not start with any of our templates, you know how to exactly add those references back into your MVC project. Now, the only custom thing I have added here in my models is this class called Movie. So let's take a look at this. It's just a simple class that has a whole bunch of attributes that describe what a movie is like. The ID, the title, the release dates, and so on. Maybe my requirement is to display a list of these movies in my web application, either through like a grid or a chart. So what I've defined here is a new class called Movie DB_Context. Notice that it implements this interface called DB_Context, which is actually coming from the Entity framework and the data.entity namespace. What this allows us to do is have a simple collection, a DB set collection of movies in our C# code. Now, how you hook up this collection of movies to your data source is entirely up to you. Maybe you just have a simple web config connection string called movie DB_Context that fetches your stuff from SQL Server, or you might be looking up like a remote URL. But at the end of the day, you have a collection of movies in your C# code. Now, normally when you have to display a collection of items in your web page, it takes a little bit of custom code to hook it up to all of the properties of each object. Further, if you want to allow CRUD operations on your collection, that's even more custom code. Hopefully all those days are behind us. Let me show you how. So let me go up to my Solution Explorer here in my controllers folder, right click and say add. And we're going to start with a new scaffolded item. Among other choices, what you see is the brand new Kendo UI scaffolder. Let me go ahead and hit add here. Immediately you have two choices, Kendo UI grid and Kendo UI chart. Do you want to display your list of movies in a grid or in a chart? If you want a Kendo UI scheduler, that scaffolding is coming very soon in the next service pack. So let me choose the chart to get started, and I'll hit add. Right away you'll notice that I get to name my controller and my view, and I get to associate my controller with a new model class. In this case, I'm just going to choose our new movie class. If you want a subset of your model to be displayed in your view, go ahead and hook up a custom view model. And finally, a data context class, in which case we can choose the movie DB_Context. And really, that's all it takes to hook up your model and your DB_Context to a controller that's going to render our UI. Let's go take a look at the chart options here. This is where you get to configure exactly how your MVC chart looks like. You can give it a title, show the tooltips, and maybe you want to show like a bar chart. In this case, you get to hook up what your X and Y axes are going to be, and you get to data bind to specific properties on your object. I've already done that, so let me cancel out of this. Now, in my controllers folder, the wizard actually went ahead and added a chart controller, which if we look inside of it, you'll notice that this guy is already hooked up to my movie DB_Context, and it knows how to go and fetch a collection of movies to display in my UI. And if I go back here and look at the views, I have a chart view here, and the chart CSHTML razor view simply renders a Kendo UI chart. Now this Kendo UI chart is already expecting a collection of movies, and you'll notice that the data source points back to my controller. And this chart is already configured to display, let's say, the x-axis shows the release date and the y-axis shows the movie title. All of this without writing a single line of code. Now, if we had wanted to display a collection of movies in a grid, it actually gets even better. So same drill, I'm going to go into my Solution Explorer, right click on my controllers, hit add, and then add a new scaffolded item. Pick the same Kendo UI scaffolder, hit add, and then go with the Kendo UI grid this time. You'll notice the same idea. We get to name our controller and our view, get to associate our controller with a given model, which in this case, the movie model, and then a DB_Context class, again the same movie DB_Context. And then I go into grid options. This is where you get to customize all of the features of your Kendo UI or MVC grid right here from the wizard, whether it's sortable, filterable, pageable, all of that. Now, the best part is if I want to make my grid editable, I get to choose my edit mode, be it pop-up or in-cell or inline. Let's go with pop-up. And then I get to choose my operations, create, update, or destroy. What do you think it does behind the scenes? Now, I already have a controller, so let me cancel out of this. And we're going to look at the grid controller, which the wizard created for us. You'll notice that my grid controller knows not only my MovieDB context, but it has 4 separate controller action results corresponding to the 4 CRUD operations: create, update, read, and delete. So it not only knows my exact view and what to display from my model, but it knows exactly how to massage my data between my model and my view and persist those changes in my collection and then all the way back to my backend data source. This I find rather empowering as a developer, and hopefully you like this MVC scaffolding features as well. Time to switch gears and let me go back to my slides. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about might actually surprise you a little. It's Telerik Ui for Winforms. Now, although we have been pushing out steady updates to all of these controls, we haven't talked about this much in the last couple of releases. This happens to be one of our richest control suites with over 110 controls, and you and me both know there are million-dollar businesses running off Winforms. So it's about time we talked about some of the cool things happening with Winforms. So, if you are using Telerik Ui for Winforms, here are a couple of exciting things you can expect out of this release. There's a brand new layout control, which is very cool, and we'll talk about this. There are pop-up editors, and there are new toggle switch controls. Now, something we have been putting a little love into are Visual Studio project templates. The goal here is to jumpstart your project and give you a great starting point for your application. And several of these new VS templates are actually Office inspired. So if you desire, out of the gate, you get an Outlook or Word or Excel type look for your applications. The Rad grid gains rich functionality like print and export to various formats. And this is just the beginning. There are updates to lots of other controls in the Winforms suite. So moving on, let's talk a little bit more about the layout control. I love this one. The layout control is actually a container element which is supposed to hold other controls, and it's meant for alignment. It gives you design time and runtime configurability. So at runtime, your users might be able to move around the child controls inside of the layout, be able to save off the layout, and then load existing layouts. Now, Winforms applications don't have much of a concept of responsiveness. So when your application window grows or shrinks, the controls remain the way they are, which looks awkward. The layout control brings the responsiveness of the web to your Winforms applications. Your child controls will grow and shrink proportionally inside the layout control as you're manipulating the window size. Moving on, several new controls in the Telerik Ui for Winforms suite will allow you to better utilize the real estate in your application canvas. There is a new nifty little pop-up editor control. This allows you to host just about any other Winforms control behind a drop-down list, and it pops out when the user clicks on it or taps into the control. There are new modern toggle switch controls with support for lots of themes. There is a new checked drop-down list and updates to several other existing controls. Care to see some of these in action? Let's jump into a quick demo. So I'm back in Visual Studio, and if I go File, New, Project, pick Telerik, pick Windows and a Winforms application, hit OK. The next screen that comes up in the wizard is the one where you can choose the project type. Notice the templates here. These are the Office-inspired templates I was talking about. They're very cool. Give it a shot. I already have a project, so let me cancel out of this and open up an existing Winforms application. So I have the designer open, and as usual, it's just a blank canvas of a Rad Forms 1 Winforms application. Let's go look in the toolbox. Hopefully all of you guys have the Telerik controls added to your Visual Studio toolbox. If I go look under Telerik Ui, Winforms and the container controls, this is where you see the new Rad layout control. This we can easily drag out to our form. Beyond that, I can right click, go look at all the properties that I want to set on my layout control. I can change the theme of my layout control and so on. And keep in mind, this is just a parent container control. You're supposed to put child controls inside of it. Now, if I go back to my toolbox here, collapse the containers and look under the editors, this is where you can find the new Rad pop-up editor control, which we can also drag to our form. Keep in mind, all of these controls are just added to your visual tree and you have complete access to them in the code behind. Now, I'm not doing much justice to these new controls, so let me show you a much more polished demo. Now, this is the official demo for Telerik Ui for Winforms for Q2 2015. This is actually included as a part of your installation, so feel free to play with this demo. Let me scroll down here and show you the layout control. And we're going to launch this and go ahead and open up this Winforms application. Notice this moving floatable window here. This is your application, and notice what happens when I resize this form. Watch how proportionally the controls shrink and grow. Pretty slick. And then if I go on to the next demo, notice how I can customize a Winforms application that's already running. Here I'm going to do an edit layout, and let's just say I'm going to draw a new label control, drop it on my form. And this is what the user can do, and he can go ahead and save off the layout and also load an existing layout. So moving on, let's look at the editor controls. And this is where you see the new pop-up editor. Notice how everything is behind a drop-down list here. This one shows a calendar and time. This one shows you a chart. This one asks the user to pick some values in a range. All of these are legitimate interactive Winforms controls. They're just hidden behind a drop-down list to save you some real estate. Hopefully, all of these new controls enable you to drive newer business functionality for your Winforms applications. That's all for Winforms. Back to the slides we go. Okay, so I'm running a little short of time. Let me step on the gas here. The next thing we're going to talk about is the Telerik report server. So Michael already took the wraps of this in the last release. It's meant to be your one-stop shop to store and manage reports. What's new in this release is we are taking off that community preview tag. It's a brand new official product. So let's do a quick refresher on what exactly is Report Server. It is a single responsive web interface that allows you to store, manage, edit, view, schedule all types of reports. And it has robust user management built in. So that means authentication and authorization that allows you access to these reports. So once you have Report Server installed, you get some awesome benefits. Not only can your users store, manage, view, and export reports, they can also see the versioning of the reports and access these reports from just about any device, web, desktop, or mobile. Check out the product page for more information and some heavy discounts. So let's take a quick look at some of the technical specs. You can host a report server on just about any modern Windows box. The actual creation of the reports still stays with Telerik Reporting, but then take a look at the vast array of data sources that you can use to pull data into your reports. And then you have an equally impressive list of export formats as the users are consuming your reports from the report server. Now, I want to make a quick distinction here between Telerik Reporting and the report server. Notice that they both share the same reporting engine, the reporting designer, but Telerik Reporting is more for creation, while the report server is more for scheduling, storage, viewing, exporting, distribution, and management of the reports. In addition, you gain robust user management to control access to your reports. We are very excited about the report server, and hopefully it enables your business scenarios. So moving on, let's take a quick look at some of the updates to other products in the Telerik DevTools family. Now, Telerik Just Code aims to be your one-stop Visual Studio refactoring tool. It is being rewritten from ground up while maintaining feature parity. We are using the new Roslyn compiler platform from Microsoft, so it's using the same API hooks that's actually compiling your code. We have support for VS 2015, and it's rich in features like code analysis, navigation, and refactoring. In fact, it allows you to debug decompiled code, which sounds like magic. Now, Just Code aims to be your silent friend. You get a simple menu in Visual Studio that allows you access to all of its functionality. You get to define custom warnings and choose when to suppress them. You get continuous, solution-wide code analysis that helps make your code base so much better. I highly encourage you to take a look at the new Just Code. It's included as a part of DevCraft. Moving on to Telerik Just Decompile. We have recently made the entire decompilation engine entirely open source. It's free, forever, for everyone. Just Decompile now has support for VS 2015 and C#6, and it gives you precious insight into third-party DLLs. And finally, let's talk about what's new in Telerik Ui for Windows Universal. There's a brand new data forms control, which is very helpful. You bind it to a custom object and it automatically renders all of the UI and matching editors for all of the public properties in your object. There's a new accordion style expander control which allows you to expand and collapse sections of your app canvas. And finally, Windows 10 is just around the corner, and our unification story between Windows Phone and Windows 8 codebases continues. We already have support for VS 2015 and your apps are Windows 10 compatible. We will keep investing more in the UI for Windows Universal Suite so you can build modern Windows apps using the Universal Windows platform. Alright, so I have talked about a lot of things. I'm going to leave you with some resources that point you to exactly what's new with every one of these products. Please take a look. Okay, so we are at the end of a very busy hour, and hopefully you see that this is a packed release and there is something for everybody. whether you're building for web, desktop, or mobile. We sincerely thank you for your time and all the love that you have for Telerik DevTools. Now, just give us 1 minute to get set up. All three of us are going to be on air and trying to answer as many of your questions as we can. Thank you.